The pen in my hand trembled as I hovered over the divorce papers. I tried to steady my grip, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. The bustling noise of times, square outside, filtered through the glass walls of the cafe, a constant hum of life that made our small table feel even more exposed. Neon lights from the billboard streaked across the polished marble floor, reflecting off the glass panels enclosing us. I felt like I was in a fishbowl, on display for the world at the worst moment of my life. Across from me, Richard leaned back in his chair with an infuriatingly smug expression. My soon-to-be ex-husband wore the same tailored navy suit that he always did when he wanted to project importance. His dark hair was neatly combed, not a strand out of place, as if this were just another business meeting for him. In some twisted way, perhaps it was. After all, he had orchestrated this public meeting, insisting we sign the final divorce documents, over coffee in Midtown Manhattan, in a glass-walled cafe where anyone could watch. By his side, a willowy blonde sat with her legs crossed, the red soles of her designer heels flashing as she bounced one foot lazily. Chloe, Richard's new fiancée, looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She was younger than me by several years, with ice-blue eyes and a practiced, polite smile that didn't reach them. The massive diamond ring on her left hand caught the light every time she moved, a not-so-subtle reminder of how quickly Richard had replaced me. I inhaled slowly, trying to maintain a facade of calm. I wouldn't let them see me break. The latte in front of me had long gone cold, untouched except for the anxious swirling I'd given it with a spoon earlier. My throat was dry as sandpaper. "Come now, Elena, don't look so grim," Richard drawled, picking up his espresso cup. The casual use of my first name felt oddly intimate given the circumstances, but the gleam in his eyes was anything but kind. "This is supposed to be a happy occasion, a fresh start for both of us." He sipped his coffee as if to punctuate the point, then set it down with a clink. "A happy occasion, right." My eyes flickered to the documents on the table between us. The final severing of a marriage that had once been my whole world. I had been Elena Greco for 5 years, and in a few signatures I would officially revert to Elena Ricci, the woman who apparently wasn't enough for her husband, the woman who was being publicly discarded and replaced. I forced a tight smile to my lips. Of course. A fresh start. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, as though it belonged to someone else. I'd practiced what I would say a dozen times in the mirror, determined to remain composed. But now, faced with Richard's gloating and Chloe's barely concealed amusement, the words felt hollow. Richard's smile broadened at my brittle agreement. He reached over and flipped through the pages, tapping where my signature was still needed. "I know you always hated how much paperwork there is in business," he remarked lightly. "Consider this practice. Sign here and here." I gripped the pen tighter. As I scrawled my name on the first marked line, I heard Richard give a short laugh under his breath. I glanced up sharply, catching the glance he shared with Chloe. There was a glint of cruelty in his brown eyes that I remembered far too well. It was the look he'd get when he was about to deliver a cutting remark, often framed as helpful advice or constructive criticism. In our marriage, those looks had always been followed by words that left me feeling small and inadequate. "Your hand is shaking, darling," he said, feigning concern as his gaze settled on the pen in my unsteady grasp. "Are you nervous? There's really no need to be. I've been more than fair with the settlement." I bit back a sharp retort. Fair? His definition of fair was laughable. After dragging out our separation, for over a year and draining our joint accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle with Chloe, he had finally agreed to terms that left me with little more than my own car and a token payment. But I didn't marry him for money, and I refused to beg for any now. I had my pride, even if he was doing his best to strip it from me. I signed another line, willing myself not to cry. The legal jargon blurred on the next page as my vision wavered. "Don't you dare," I commanded myself. "Not here, not in front of them." I blinked the tears back, my heartbeat throbbing in my ears. Chloe leaned forward, resting her chin on her manicured hand as she looked between Richard and me. "You know, Elena," she said sweetly, "I truly hope you find your own happiness after this. Everyone deserves someone special." Her lips curved in a sympathetic smile that felt as fake as the extensions in her perfectly coiffed hair. I knew that tone, pity, wrapped in condescension. It made my stomach twist. "Thank you," I managed to reply softly, not meeting her eyes. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply her words cut. It had only been a year ago that I'd discovered Richard's affair with this woman. He had denied it fervently until I found the receipts, hotel, bills, and extravagant jewelry, purchases that weren't for me. After that, there was no need for pretenses. He'd shrugged and told me I wasn't the wife he needed anymore, that I wasn't exciting enough for his new taste in life. It turned out his new taste was a 24-year-old, aspiring model with expensive habits. And now here she was, sitting in my spot, wearing the ring I once dreamed of, living the life I had built with him. I pressed the pen to the next line, my signature coming out slightly uneven this time. Richard's eyes followed the movement, and I heard that little snort of a laugh again. "Speaking of someone special," he said, his tone turning light and taunting. "Elena, is there a reason you didn't bring anyone with you today?" I froze, my pen hovering mid-letter. Slowly, I lifted my eyes to meet his. Richard's expression was almost childlike in its feigned innocence, but I saw the malice beneath. Chloe gave a soft gasp as if scandalized. "Richard, darling, that's rather forward," she chided, though the curl of her lips indicated she was enjoying this. He shrugged, not taking his eyes off me. "What? It's a reasonable question. It's been, what, a year since we separated? I figured Elena might have found someone new by now." He said it casually, but his gaze was fixed on me with predatory delight. My mouth felt dry. This was a trap, I could sense it. If I said nothing, he'd take it as confirmation that I was alone and likely mock me for it. If I lied and said I had someone, he'd almost certainly press for details, eager to expose another lie or delusion of mine in front of Chloe. Richard always did enjoy cornering me with impossible questions. In the past, it had been about my ambitions or personal tastes, making me justify my decisions only to shoot them down. Now it was about my love life, and he knew exactly what he was doing. I cleared my throat, trying to maintain my poise. I didn't think it was necessary to bring anyone to what should have been a simple signing of documents, I said evenly. I set the pen down for a moment, afraid I might snap it in half if I continued forcing signatures through this conversation. Richard tutted, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "So no one, then?" He sighed dramatically and leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "Elena, honestly, I'm not surprised. You were always so reserved. How will you ever meet someone new if you keep hiding yourself away?" Anger flared under my skin, burning through the humiliation for a blessed second. Hiding myself away? He was the one who had isolated me throughout our marriage, discouraging my friendships, belittling my hobbies, ensuring that his career and his friends always came first. By the end, I had been little more than a shadow of myself living in his world. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Chloe's soft laugh cut through the air. "Don't be cruel, Richard," she purred, though her eyes were glittering with malice. "I'm sure Elena will find someone, eventually. Eventually. They may as well have driven a knife into me." I straightened my spine and squared my shoulders, channeling every ounce of dignity I had left. If I could survive 5 years of Richard's subtle insults, and a year of bitter divorce wrangling, I could survive this final meeting. "I appreciate your concern," I said, managing not to choke on the words. "But my personal life is not your business anymore." "Either of you." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Fair enough. Just thought I'd ask. After all, I'm moving on." He slid an arm around Chloe's chair, proprietary. She responded by nestling closer to him. "It would only be fair for you to move on too. Though I must admit I expected you might struggle to find a man who could handle your quirks." I knew what he meant by quirks. My anxiety in crowds that he never understood. My preference for quiet nights and over-flashy parties. My dedication to the small nonprofit I worked at rather than some high-paying job he could brag about. He had always thought me too timid, too ordinary. Not an asset for a man with his ambitions. Heat climbed into my cheeks. My composure was slipping. I could feel the cracks forming in the mask I'd so carefully put on today. Beneath the table, my free hand balled into a fist on my lap. "There's nothing wrong with me," I said quietly. He smirked. "I didn't say there was. But you know as well as I do, I require a certain type of partner by my side. You were fine for a while, but look at what I have now." He glanced at Chloe with a gleam of pride, as if she were a prize he'd won. She gave him a perfect smile. "Chloe understands my world. She thrives in it. That's something you never could do, Elena." My heart pounded painfully, as much as I wanted to deny it. Some part of me had long believed those words. I'd tried to fit into Richard's high society lifestyle, I truly had. But I always felt like I was performing a role that didn't belong to me, and he never missed a chance to point out my failings. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, drawing in a breath. Let it go, I urged myself. This will be over soon. Just a few more signatures, and I can walk away from this table and rebuild my life in peace. But Richard wasn't done. He was like a cat toying with a mouse. And now that he sensed my weakness, he moved in for the kill. You know, I used to worry about you, he continued with a sigh. Thought maybe you'd be okay after we split. But here we are and he gestured vaguely at my empty side of the table, his gaze flicking pointedly to the lack of a second coffee cup. Of any sign that I hadn't come alone. No new man yet, huh? No one to even help you sign on the dotted line? Chloe gave a theatrical little pout. Oh, that is a shame. I'm sure there's someone out there for you. Elena. Maybe just not in the circles you used to travel. A flush burned up my neck. They were loving this. To them, I was a pathetic figure, a lonely, cast-off wife who couldn't possibly attract anyone after failing to keep a man like Richard satisfied. The injustice and cruelty of it all made my head spin. I had done nothing wrong except try to be a good wife to him. He was the one who broke our vows, who left me for a younger woman. And yet he was twisting the narrative to make me seem like the failure. Anger and hurt warred within me, and under the table my fingernails dug crescents into my palm. I wanted to shout that I did have someone, that I wasn't pathetic or alone. But revealing that now, after I'd played it off earlier, would only look like a desperate lie. Unless my pulse jumped. Unless it wasn't a lie. Technically, it wouldn't be. A forbidden, reckless idea ignited inside me. I lifted my eyes to Richard's, seeing nothing but smug pity in his expression, and I made a decision. I straightened, pushing the papers aside for the moment. You're wrong, I said quietly, my voice gaining strength with each word. I'm not alone, Richard, and I haven't been for some time. That wiped the satisfied look off his face. He blinked, exchanging a surprised glance with Chloe. What do you mean? He asked, frowning as if he couldn't comprehend it. I swallowed, my heart hammering at what I was about to do. The truth, at least part of it, was a secret I had held tightly for months. I had never intended to reveal it like this. But if there was one thing I couldn't stand any longer, it was letting Richard think he had utterly ruined my chances at happiness. I refused to let him have that power, so I lifted my chin, forcing myself to meet his gaze, and I spoke the words that would change everything. I'm married, I declared, loud enough that the neighboring tables could hear. For a second, it felt like the world stopped. Richard stared at me as if I'd just spoken in tongues. Chloe's eyes went wide, her painted lips parting in shock. The only sound was the muffled honk of a taxi, outside and the steady thrum of my own, pulse in my ears. Then Richard barked out a laugh, a sharp, derisive sound that made me flinch. Married? You? He looked genuinely amused now, a cruel grin splitting his face. Oh, Elena, that's a good one. You expect me to believe that? I held my ground, even as I felt my face heating. Believe what you want, it's the truth. He shook his head, still chuckling as if I were a child telling wild stories. Right. So where is your adoring husband then? Why are you here alone to sign divorce papers? Husbands usually don't let their wives attend these sorts of meetings solo, not if they actually exist. I bit the inside of my cheek. I hadn't anticipated him calling me out so directly, and for a moment doubt flickered. Perhaps this was a mistake. I had hoped simply stating it would be enough to rattle him, but Richard was already assuming it was a ploy. And with my husband not here, it did sound a little preposterous. Is he imaginary, this husband? Richard pressed, the scorn in his voice growing. Or maybe it's one of those online romances. Oh, don't tell me you got scammed by some guy claiming to be a prince in Nigeria? Chloe giggled behind her hand, not even bothering to hide her delight at this turn. My temper flared white-hot. Stop it, I snapped, unable to keep the quiver of frustration out of my voice. Just because you didn't know doesn't mean... He cut me off, leaning forward with a sneer. I didn't know because there is no husband. Elena, the only man you ever had was me and you lost me. You really think anyone else would want... Is there a problem here? The voice that interrupted was calm, deep, and quietly lethal. It cut through Richard's tirade like a knife through silk. My heart leapt into my throat. I knew that voice. Richard's words died on his tongue and he jerked upright, eyes widening at the sight of the man now standing behind me. Chloe made a soft, startled sound. She stared as if she was seeing a ghost. I turned my head and found myself looking up at the tall, imposing figure of my husband, Dante. He stood just behind my chair, one hand resting possessively on the back of it. How long had he been there watching? His reflection must have been in the glass before I heard him speak. Dante's eyes, dark and endless, flicked from my flushed face to Richard's stunned one. The air in the cafe seemed to shift, charged with a new tension. He was here. He had come. Relief and anxiety flooded me in equal measure. Dante was supposed to wait outside. We'd agreed he wouldn't reveal himself unless absolutely necessary. I hadn't even been sure he would show up at all. I told him I could handle this on my own. But in that moment, I was absurdly grateful to see him. Dante's presence was commanding, turning heads across the cafe. It wasn't just his height or the broad shoulders beneath his tailored charcoal overcoat. It was the aura of quiet authority that clung to him. Even without saying another word, he radiated danger and power. In the reflection of the glass wall, I could see a black car parked at the curb outside, and a driver standing alertly by the door, evidence of Dante's sudden arrival. Richard was the first to recover, though not by much. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. I saw uncertainty flash across his face before he masked it with annoyance. "Excuse me," he said, clearing his throat. "This is a private conversation. Who are you?" Dante ignored him at first. He focused on me, his free hand coming to rest on my shoulder. The gesture was gentle, but I sensed the barely leashed anger in the way his fingers tensed slightly against me. "Elena," he said quietly, and the sound of my name in his low, familiar voice eased some knot of fear inside me. "Are you all right?" Under the table, I unclenched my fist. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice was unsteady. The fight-or-flight adrenaline from standing up to Richard was now colliding with the shock of Dante's sudden appearance. Richard made an impatient noise. "Hey, buddy, I don't know who you think—" Dante's gaze snapped to him so fast I felt the whoosh of air behind me. Richard fell silent, the remainder of his words swallowed up under that deadly stare. "I believe my wife told you to stop," Dante said, voice polite but edged in ice. He moved then, stepping around to my side. Gently, he took the pen from my trembling fingers and set it down on the table. Then he placed a hand at the small of my back. The simple touch steadied me, grounding me to the moment. "Wife?" Chloe stammered, breaking her silence. Her eyes had gone round as saucers. She looked from me to Dante and back again, her cheeks draining of color. Richard's head jerked as if on a swivel. "What did you say?" he asked Dante, his tone incredulous. A hint of a cold smile tugged at the corner of Dante's lips. "I said my wife," he replied. "Elena is my wife." I watched the blood visibly drain from Richard's face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked utterly poleaxed, eyes darting between me and Dante as if trying to piece together a puzzle that made no sense. Chloe was quicker on the uptake. She rose from her chair, smoothing her trembling hands down the front of her chic ivory dress. We weren't aware Elena had remarried," she said carefully, her voice lacking its earlier confidence. "Richard, darling, did you know about this?" "Of course I didn't know," Richard snapped, finally finding his voice. He glared at me, confusion giving way to anger. "Is this some kind of joke, Elena? What the hell is going on?" I opened my mouth, but Dante stepped forward, subtly moving himself as a shield between me and my ex. His hand remained protectively at my back. "It's not a joke," Dante said calmly. "Elena and I have been married for a few months now. I'd hoped to remain out of the divorce proceedings, but—" His dark gaze flicked over Richard with open disdain. "It seems I'm needed to ensure everything proceeds civilly." Richard bristled, bracing himself as if summoning the vestiges of his bravado. He squared his shoulders. "Civilly? Who do you think you—" Before he could finish that sentence, Dante took one leisurely step closer, putting us nearly face to face with Richard and Chloe. The difference was that Dante looked utterly relaxed, one hand still at my back and the other now resting lightly on the table, while Richard looked like a nervous animal ready to bolt. "You must be Richard," Dante said, as if discussing the weather. He extended his right hand to shake, an oddly formal gesture in the charged atmosphere. Reflexively, Richard reached out to take it. I almost wanted to warn him, but it was too late. Dante's fingers closed around Richard's hand in a grip that made Richard flinch. I saw my ex's face go pale, his attempt at an assertive stance faltering as Dante squeezed just a fraction too hard to be friendly. Richard tried to pull back, but Dante held him firm for a beat longer than necessary. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Thank you for taking care of the paperwork," he said, each word dripping with quiet menace. "We'll take it from here." Only then did he release Richard's hand. Richard snatched it back, flexing his fingers with a wince. His cheeks flushed with humiliation and anger. "You have no right." "I have every right," Dante cut him off icily. "You are signing away any claim to her, are you not?" "Elena belongs with me now." My breath caught at Dante's phrasing. Belongs. With me echoing in my chest. There was a possessiveness in his tone that warmed and frightened me at once. He'd never said anything like that to me before. But hearing it now, I realized it didn't frighten me in the way one might think. It was more that it sent a thrill through my heart, as if some part of me had been waiting to hear those words. Richard looked as if he might explode. Chloe put a hand on his arm. Either to restrain him or steady herself, I wasn't sure. "Richard," she whispered urgently. "We should go." She was eyeing Dante with open fear, and I suddenly understood why. The name Dante, his commanding presence, the black car outside, it all clicked for her, and likely for Richard as well. "You..." Richard swallowed hard, fury mingling with uncertainty in his eyes. "Dante, Moretti," he said slowly, as if dredging up a memory. "I've heard of you." A faint, humorless smile touched Dante's lips. "I'm sure you have." My gaze jumped between them. Richard's posture had shifted from outraged to wary. He finally recognized Dante's last name, and with it, the weight it carried in certain circles. Moretti was a name whispered in the shadows of Manhattan's elite, often accompanied by rumors of power, wealth, and danger. Richard may not have known the details, but he knew enough to be afraid. Chloe clearly knew too. She had gone stiff, her perfect composure cracking as she tried to gently tug Richard back. "Darling, let's just sign the papers and leave," she urged, voice thin. For a moment, Richard remained stubborn, pride warring with self-preservation. His eyes flickered to me, and there was a spark of betrayal there, as if I had personally affronted him by finding someone beyond his influence. Then, with a tight jaw, he reached down and snatched up the pen I had set aside. In silence, face burning, Richard scribbled his signatures on the remaining lines where I had left off. His movements were jerky with barely restrained rage. I stood by, Dante's hand still a steady presence against my back, and watched my ex-husband finish severing the last tie between us. The irony was not lost on me. Richard was only rushing to sign now because Dante's presence left him no choice. In the end, even my divorce was being salvaged by the man who had become my protector in all things. "There!" Richard spat, tossing the pen down so hard it bounced off the table. He grabbed the sheaf of papers and gave them a cursory check. "It's done. Congratulations, Elena. You're a free woman." The bitterness in his voice could have poisoned a lake. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Free. It felt like the word had double meaning. As I stood next to Dante, free from Richard's cruelty, yes, but also free to be what I already was, Dante's wife. Without the shadow of my past hanging over us, Dante nodded once, a slight inclination of his head. "Thank you," he said calmly to Richard, though gratitude was the last thing in his tone. "We'll show ourselves out." Richard opened his mouth as if to retort, but then he caught Dante's eye and seemed to think better of it. I could see his pulse hammering at his throat, fear finally winning out. Chloe tugged at his arm again. "Let's go, please," she whispered urgently. Wordlessly, Richard gathered the papers and stepped back from the table, putting more distance between himself and Dante. He looked at me then, and the mix of emotions on his face would have fascinated me in another context, anger, confusion, and a hint of regret, perhaps. But it was the resentment that won out. He narrowed his eyes. "This isn't over," he said quietly. It sounded like a warning, or maybe a petty parting shot. "You think you can just walk away from everything?" My heart lurched. Before I could respond, Dante shifted ever so slightly, positioning himself even more squarely between Richard and me. His voice dropped to a silken threat. "Be very careful, Mr. Davenport," he said, using Richard's surname like a polite curse. "For your own sake. Everything is over. You will not bother my wife again." They locked eyes for a charged moment. Then Richard looked away, breaking first. Without another word, he took Chloe by the elbow and nearly dragged her toward the exit. Chloe glanced back at us, her face pale and stunned, and I couldn't help but think that her fairy tale with Richard was losing some of its shine in the face of what she had witnessed. I wondered if she would think twice about marrying a man who had such dangerous connections. But that wasn't my concern anymore. The moment they pushed, out through the glass doors, and into the neon-lit chaos of Times Square, the tension in the cafe seemed to deflate. I realized then that the entire place had fallen into a hush during the confrontation. Now, as if on cue, low murmurs rose around us. Patrons whispering speculatively, chairs scraping as people leaned in to gossip. We were the center of a small spectacle, it seemed. Heat flooded my face. God, what a scene we must have made. The last thing I wanted was to be the subject of strangers' conversations or, worse, end up on someone's social media. Video as the drama, in a Times Square cafe. Dante must have sensed my mortification. He gently turned to me and placed his hands on my shoulders. His dark eyes searched mine, concern replacing the ice that had been there moments ago. Elena, he said softly, drawing my attention away from the onlookers. It always amazed me how he could flip from terrifying to tender in the span of a breath. Are you all right? I let out a shaky breath and nodded. Yes, I think so. My voice quivered, betraying the adrenaline crash I was starting to feel. His gaze traveled over me as if checking for any sign of hurt. Finding none, at least not physical, he inclined his head. Come, let's get out of here. With a protective arm around my back, he guided me towards the exit. I kept my eyes down, avoiding the curious stares that followed us. My heart was still thundering and my legs felt unsteady, but Dante's solid presence kept me moving forward. Outside, the evening air was crisp against my flushed skin. Times Square's assault of lights and sounds pressed in, but Dante was like a shield against the chaos. He nodded to one of his men, Nico, his driver, who hurried to open the back door of the sleek black town car idling by the curb. I slid into the cool leather seat and Dante followed. The door shut, muffling the city's noise. In the relative quiet, I exhaled slowly. We were cocooned away from prying eyes at last. As the car pulled smoothly into traffic, I finally turned to look at the man beside me. The man who was now truly, unquestionably my husband in the eyes of the world. Dante Moretti's profile was illuminated by the passing glow of neon signs. Strong jaw, slightly crooked. Nose, evidence of an old break that only made him more ruggedly handsome. And those intense eyes that now gazed back at me with a softness reserved only for me. He reached over and took my hand in his. Only then did I notice that my fingers were ice cold and trembling. I curled them around his warm, steady grasp. You came, I murmured, hardly believing he was real, and not an apparition conjured by my desperation. Dante's thumb brushed over the back of my hand. Of course I came, he said as if it were inevitable. His voice had lost that dangerous edge it held moments ago. Now it was low and reassuring. Did you think I'd let you face him alone? I trailed off, unsure how to put my swirling thoughts into words. I had thought I could handle it, that I didn't need to involve him. That pride now seemed foolish. I just didn't want things to get messy, I finished lamely. A wry smile ghosted across his lips. Messy, huh? He glanced at our still clasped hands. Only then did I notice a faint tremor in his usually steady grip. Dante was angry, no, furious. Not at me, but at what had happened. I could tell from the tightness of his jaw that he was holding himself. Back from marching after Richard and finishing what almost started in that cafe. I squeezed his hand gently. It's over now. I'm okay. The words came out softly, meant as much to calm him as to reassure myself. His dark eyes flickered to my face and something in them softened. He shouldn't have said those things to you, Dante muttered. His free hand clenched into a fist on his thigh, the leather of the seat creaking under the pressure. I would have intervened sooner, but I wanted to give you the chance to handle it your way, until I heard him raising his voice. Mental image of Dante standing, outside the cafe watching us made me flush with mixed feelings. Gratitude, embarrassment that he'd overheard my humiliation, and a flicker of warmth at his protective instinct. I'm glad you were there, I admitted. I averted my gaze, staring at the passing blur of lights beyond the window. I didn't expect it, though. I know I told you I could manage. Dante exhaled slowly. He reached over and gently tucked a strand of my dark hair behind my ear, a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. You don't have to manage everything alone. Elena, not anymore. I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat and nodded. Outside, skyscrapers and neon billboards danced in the glass reflection. But inside the car, it felt like we were in our own little world. We sat in silence for a moment. My adrenaline was ebbing, leaving behind exhaustion and the raw sting of everything Richard had said. As if reading my mind, Dante shifted closer and lifted my hand to his lips. He pressed a light kiss to my knuckles. "He won't bother you again," he said quietly, a promise laced in steel. I believed him. Richard's parting threat, "This isn't over," had rattled me, but next to Dante it felt empty. Compared to the reach of Dante's power, Richard was insignificant. If Dante said he would prevent my ex-husband from causing more trouble, he would. The tension in my shoulders unwound slightly. "Thank you," I whispered. I meant for stepping in, for protecting me, for everything, so much more than just today. Dante's hand was warm as it cradled mine. He studied me for a moment, his brow furrowed slightly, as if debating whether to say something. Finally he spoke, voice low. "Elena, I'm sorry. I should never have let you go in, there alone in the first place." I opened my mouth to protest, but he continued before I could. "I thought I was respecting your wishes. You wanted a discreet divorce, no drama, and I understood why you didn't want my involvement known. But if I had known he'd try to hurt you like that..." His jaw tightened, words failing as the anger seeped back in. "It's not your fault," I said firmly, shaking my head. "Richard has a talent for finding where it hurts. I doubt anything could have stopped him from trying today. Besides, you did come. You saved me from making a fool of myself." I managed a weak laugh. A shadow crossed Dante's face. "He was the fool," he said. "Treating you like that in public, no less. He doesn't know how lucky he was, that I didn't break his fingers when I shook his hand." Dante flexed his right hand, unconsciously, as if recalling the earlier restraint he'd exercised. I noticed a slight redness across his knuckles. Impulsively, I reached for his hand, turning it over to examine it in the dim light. One knuckle had a small cut, perhaps from Richard's ring when Dante squeezed his hand. I ran my thumb lightly over the mark. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," Dante said softly, but a ghost of a smile touched his lips at my concern. "You should see the other guy." There was a note of dark humor in his tone, and despite everything, I found myself smiling faintly. His gaze lingered on my face, on the tentative smile that had slipped through my defenses. The tension eased between us, replaced by a quieter, warmer emotion. The overhead light of the car cast a glow on Dante's features, highlighting the strong lines of his cheekbones and the gentle curve of concern in his eyes. For a second, neither of us spoke. The city rolled by outside, bright, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded among its millions of stories. My life had irrevocably changed in the last half hour, and yet New York glimmered on, indifferent. There was something oddly comforting about that. Eventually, Dante cleared his throat. "We'll be home soon," he said, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. Home. The word settled in me. For months, home had been a confusing concept, split between the apartment I'd rented after leaving, Richard, and the new life I was still trying to understand with Dante. Now, with the divorce finalized and Dante publicly claiming me, I realized I truly was leaving one home behind and embracing another. The car merged onto a quieter street, pulling away from the neon cacophony. As we neared the upscale neighborhood where Dante's penthouse was, my mind began to drift. The adrenaline crash left me reflective, raw memories surfacing now that the immediate crisis was over. My eyes felt heavy, my body drained, and with Dante beside me, my guard began to slip. I leaned my head back against the seat, still lightly holding Dante's hand. My thoughts wandered to how surreal it was. Richard's taunts, then Dante appearing like a silent guardian at just the right moment. It wasn't the first time he had shown up when I most needed help. In fact, the first time had been months ago, on a night that seemed a lifetime away now. A night when I had thought myself utterly alone, and Dante had stepped out of the shadows to save me. As the car glided to a smooth stop at a traffic light, I let my eyes close, the memory washing over me like a tide. The sounds of the city around us faded, giving way to echoes of that fateful night. It was late summer that year, and the city was unforgivingly hot even at night. I had ventured out with a friend to a crowded bar, hoping to drown my sorrows for an evening. In hindsight, stepping out alone for fresh air down a dim side street was a mistake. Two men with cruel smiles cornered me by a dumpster, sensing easy prey. My heart nearly burst with fear as they closed in. Then out of nowhere, a deep voice echoed in the alley. I believe the lady said no. In a blur of swift, precise movements, the two thugs were yanked away from me. I watched, stunned, as a tall stranger dispatched them with terrifying efficiency. One, disarmed and crumpled by a single, brutal punch. The other cowed at gunpoint in the blink of an eye. It was over almost before I realized what happened. The stranger turned to me, concern softening his hard features. In the faint light, I saw a strong, chiseled face and eyes as dark as midnight. Are you hurt? He asked. Shakily, I managed to say I was fine, just frightened. He nodded, then produced a phone and barked some orders to an unseen person, something about sending help and dealing with the trash in the alley. I stood there trembling, trying to comprehend how effortlessly he had neutralized the threat. He ended the call and stepped closer, shrugging off his suit jacket to drape it around my shoulders. Only then did I realize I was shivering. You're safe now, he said gently. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Tears of relief sprang to my eyes. I barely choked out a thank you. The man gave me a small, reassuring smile. Let me take you home. Normally, I'd never follow a stranger, especially one who clearly carried a weapon, but he'd just saved me from a nightmare, and something in his calm, steady demeanor made me trust him. Numbly, I allowed him to guide me to a sleek black town car idling at the alley's mouth. Inside the car, as we pulled away, I finally found my voice again. Who are you? I asked, clutching his jacket around me. He hesitated a beat before replying. Dante Moretti. Recognition flickered. I'd heard that name whispered before, rumors of a powerful man who might have ties to the old crime families of New York. Yet here, in the quiet of the car, he wasn't some ominous kingpin. He was the man who had rescued me. Elena, I offered in return. Elena Ricci. He inclined his head in polite greeting, as if we were meeting at a cocktail party rather than a dark alley. The incongruity almost made me laugh. By the time we reached my apartment building, shock was setting in fully. My knees felt weak as Dante helped me out of the car. Before I went inside, he pressed a simple black business card into my hand. It bore only his name and a phone number. If you ever need help, he said, holding my gaze. At any time, call me. There was an intensity in those words that left me breathless. I nodded and whispered another heartfelt thanks. I didn't expect to see him again, but a few days later, when I mustered the courage to call that number, ostensibly to thank him properly, Dante answered on the first ring. He suggested meeting for coffee. Sitting across from him in a quiet cafe a day later, I felt worlds away from that terrifying night. Dante was poised, attentive as I expressed my gratitude. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I stumbled over my thanks. How do you thank someone for possibly saving your life? There's no need, he said gently, wrapping his hands around his espresso cup. I'm just glad I was there. Despite his humility, I sensed an underlying tension in him. As we chatted lightly about safer topics, his dark eyes appraised our surroundings, and I realized he hadn't come just for pleasantries. He had something on his mind. Finally, Dante set his cup down and leveled a serious look at me. Elena, I hope you won't find this intrusive, but I did a bit of checking to ensure those men wouldn't bother you. Again? My heart skipped. Oh, okay. He hesitated, then continued. In the process, I learned something concerning. Your ex-husband, Richard, has significant gambling debts. Some very dangerous people are looking to collect. Since you're still legally married, he trailed off, letting me fill in the awful implication. I felt the blood drain from my face. Richard's debts? I knew he'd had some financial troubles, but gambling? And dangerous people? I had no idea. I murmured, both angry and scared. Angry that Richard could be so reckless. Scared that I might unwittingly be a target because of him. Dante's jaw tightened. I'm sorry to lay this on you, but after what happened the other night, I suspect those men targeted you thinking you were an easy mark. Perhaps they recognized you as Richard's wife. My stomach turned. It fit too well. The thugs had mentioned something about me flashing money at the bar. Maybe they'd just been opportunists. Or maybe word had already spread of Richard's estranged wife out alone. I won't let anyone harm you, Dante added firmly. But you should be careful. Perhaps stay with a friend or somewhere secure for a while. A spike of panic shot through me. My lease was month to month. I could leave, but where would I go? Sensing my distress, Dante reached across the small table and rested his hand over mine. The gesture was surprisingly tender, calming my racing mind. "You could stay at one of my properties," he offered. "Just until things settle. It's secure, no one would know you're there." I opened my mouth to protest, pride and wariness, flaring, but the memory of those men and the reality of Richard's mess tamped that down. The truth was, I didn't feel safe, not in my apartment alone, and I trusted Dante almost inexplicably. He had proven he was capable of protecting me. "All right," I whispered, voice trembling. "Just for a little while." Relief eased the tight line of his shoulders. "Good, we'll make the arrangements." True to his word, that evening I moved into a furnished penthouse loft owned by Dante's company. It was in a good neighborhood, with discreet security. Dante himself brought me there, ensuring I was settled. I expected him to leave once I was safe, but to my surprise and secret relief, he began stopping by often, sometimes bringing dinner or asking if I needed anything. In those days, a strange new normal developed. Dante was a steady presence, coordinating his work around checking on me. We talked for hours about everything, our upbringings, my job in the nonprofit sector, his favorite books. He had a sharp mind and a dry wit that appeared when I least expected, coaxing laughter from me in the midst of my turmoil. I found myself looking forward to his visits more than I dared admit. In the quiet moments, I would catch him watching me with a soft intensity, as if I were someone worth protecting, worth caring about. After years of feeling like an afterthought in my marriage, this was both wondrous and bewildering. One warm evening, about a week after I'd moved into the safe loft, Dante and I dined on takeout Italian, comfortable as old friends. Over a second glass of wine, he grew uncharacteristically quiet. "There's one sure way to guarantee your safety," he said, almost to himself, as he toyed with the stem of his glass. Then he met my eyes. "Marry me." My heart lurched violently. "What?" I stammered, nearly knocking over my drink. His expression was earnest, if a bit tense. "Hear me out. As my wife, you'd take my last name, severing the obvious link to Richard, and anyone with ill intentions would know you're under my protection." "Untouchable." He took a breath. "It would be a partnership. I protect you, and in return, well, I suppose I get the peace of mind knowing you're safe." I was struck silent. Married to Dante? We barely knew each other, and yet, in these few weeks, he'd become my anchor. The idea wasn't as outrageous to my heart as it was to my logical mind, but I couldn't quite wrap my head around why he would go so far. As if sensing my swirling thoughts, Dante added quietly, "I don't do anything by half measures. Elena, I take care of what's mine. What's mine." The word sent an unexpected warmth through me. I realized then that for Dante, this offer wasn't just about pragmatics. He cared for me, maybe more deeply than I understood. And if I was honest, I cared for him too. Still, marriage was enormous. I had just escaped one. The wounds from Richard were still raw. We could just pretend," I faltered. "Tell people I'm under your protection without actually—" He shook his head. "My world operates on binding promises and clear signals. A ring on your finger, my name on paper, it sends a message. I won't risk some thug thinking you're a disposable pawn." His voice dropped, a hint of vulnerability bleeding through. "But if you're truly against it, I won't force you. I'll find another way." Our eyes locked in the hushed twilight of the loft. Marrying Dante meant leaping into the unknown with a man who, despite the short time, had shown me more respect and kindness than Richard ever did. It was crazy. It was risky. But deep in my soul, I felt a reassuring pulse of rightness. I reached out and covered his hand with mine. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll do it." His eyes widened slightly, breath catching. "You will?" A small, shaky smile found its way to my lips. "You're right. This will protect me, and I trust you, Dante." I exhaled, nerves and conviction swirling. "We'll figure the rest out as we go." Relief and something like gratitude swept across his face. He turned his palm up to entwine his fingers with mine. "Thank you, Elena. You won't regret this." The very next day, we quietly exchanged vows at a courthouse with only a city official and one of Dante's men as witness. I wore a simple dress, Dante a crisp suit. When it came time to say, "I do," he looked into my eyes with such steady certainty that all my lingering fears melted away. After we signed the certificate, he slid a delicate platinum band onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always belonged there. The kiss he gave me to make it official was brief. a polite brush of lips that nonetheless sent my heart fluttering. There were no grand romantic proclamations in that moment, but the gentle squeeze of my hand in his told me enough. I was safe with him. We agreed to keep the marriage secret until my divorce was finalized and threats neutralized. To the outside world, I simply disappeared from Richard's shadow. But in private, Dante and I began building something like a life together. I moved into his penthouse, initially taking a separate bedroom out of a mix of propriety and uncertainty. He never pressured me, treating me with unfailing respect. In turn, I found myself drawn more to him each day. The protectiveness in his actions, the quiet humor he revealed only to me, the way he listened, truly listened, to what I thought or wanted for my future. What started as a marriage of convenience slowly, inevitably deepened. Late-night conversations over wine turned into falling asleep on the couch beside him, feeling utterly safe. Little touches grew natural, a hand at the small of my back, my head on his shoulder during movie nights. We were careful with each other, almost courtly in our slow dance around the obvious fact that both of us felt far more than we dared say. Once I walked in on him playing a soft melody on the grand piano in the penthouse living room. He stopped abruptly, embarrassed, but I begged him to continue. He did, and I sat beside him, resting my head on his shoulder as the gentle music enveloped us. In that wordless moment, my heart swelled with love for this complicated, wonderful man. I suspected, hoped, he felt the same for me, though neither of us voiced it. Not yet. Months passed in our little bubble. By the time Richard finally agreed to meet and sign the divorce papers, I felt like a different woman, no longer terrified and alone, but stronger, supported, and deeply cared for. Secretly married to Dante, I had blossomed under the warmth of genuine respect and affection. I had even begun to imagine a real future with him, a true marriage in every sense. All that remained was to close the door on my old life, which led me at last to tonight, facing Richard in that cafe and bravely declaring a truth he never expected, that I had given my heart to someone far worthier than him. A gentle squeeze of my hand pulled me back to the present. I blinked away the haze of memory and found Dante watching me intently in the dim back seat of the car. "We're home," he said softly. The car had come to a stop. Sure enough, through the window I recognized the private underground parking of our building, the faint echo of the garage door closing behind us. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I'd been so lost in thought I hadn't even noticed the drive passing. "I'm sorry," I murmured, embarrassed. "I was just thinking." Dante lifted our joined hands to his lips and pressed a kiss there. "You've had a long day." He opened the door and stepped out, then offered his hand to help me from the car. I took it, my legs still a bit unsteady, but not from fear this time, rather from the whirlwind of everything that had transpired. Nico was already waiting by the private elevator. Tactfully looking elsewhere to give us space, Dante kept his hand at the small of my back as we walked over. It was a subtle gesture, yet grounding. In the elevator, we rose swiftly to the penthouse. The moment the doors opened directly into our living room, I exhaled, tension draining. Here, in our sanctuary above the city, everything felt a little more manageable. Nico hovered in the doorway, clearly awaiting instructions. Dante gave him a nod. "Double security on the building tonight. No visitors. And get someone on Richard Davenport's tail, quietly. I want to know where he is, and ensure he understands to keep his distance." Nico's face hardened in determination. "Consider it done, boss." With that, he slipped out, the elevator doors closing behind him. Silence settled as Dante and I were left alone in the spacious glow of the penthouse. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting faint patterns on the hardwood floor. I realized I was still clutching the divorce documents in one hand. The papers slightly crumpled from how tightly I'd held them during the ride. Slowly, I set them down on a console table. "It's really over," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone. Those papers signified the end of my old life. Dante stepped behind me, his reflection joining mine in the glass of the window. Our eyes met there. He was watching me with a concerned, tender expression. "How do you feel?" he asked. I swallowed. "Relieved, numb, free." I managed a shaky smile. "I don't think it's sunk in fully yet." He nodded in understanding. His hands settled gently on my shoulders, the warmth of his touch easing the last remnants of my earlier tremors. "Tonight was a lot," he said. "I'm sorry it got so dramatic." I turned to face him, reaching up to rest my hand over one of his at my shoulder. Don't be. If you hadn't shown up, I dread to think what else Richard might have said or done. You have nothing to apologize for. If anything, I should apologize. For blurting out our secret without warning you. Dante's lips quirked. Actually, hearing you say it, claiming you were married, he paused, as if choosing words. I felt proud. Proud that you're mine, and damn satisfied to finally show that to the world, even if it was just one pathetic man and his mistress. Flutter stirred in my chest. I gazed up at him, marveling at the fierce light in his eyes as he spoke. Dante Moretti was proud to call me his. The insecure part of me, the one Richard had cultivated over years, wanted to dismiss that as flattery. But I knew Dante better. He didn't say things he didn't mean. I was so scared, I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. He was tearing me down and I snapped. I shouldn't have revealed. Dante silenced me by moving his hand from my shoulder to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing against my cheekbone. You did nothing wrong. I only regret that I didn't step in sooner. Hearing how he spoke to you, his jaw clenched, rage flickering at the memory. If you hadn't done it, I was about 10 seconds away from walking in there and breaking his jaw, despite the seriousness. A small laugh escaped me. I think you scared him enough without actual violence. He smirked, a dark amusement in his features. I certainly hope so. If he has any brain cells, he'll crawl into a hole and never bother you. Again? Our faces were inches apart now. The adrenaline of earlier had faded, leaving behind a heightened awareness of each other. His thumb traced softly along my jaw. I felt the tension of tonight alchemizing into a different kind of tension, a charged, magnetic pull that had been building between us for months, now stronger than ever. Dante, I whispered, placing a hand on his chest. I could feel the steady thump of his heart through his shirt. Elena, he replied, voice husky. He searched my eyes. I have a confession. My heart skipped. What is it? He inhaled deeply as if steadying himself. When I walked into that cafe tonight and saw him belittling you, I have never been more furious in my life. It took everything in me not to do something extreme. The only thing that held me back was you. I didn't want to frighten you or make a scene that would hurt you further. You could never frighten me, I said softly and meant it. He gave a faint, almost self-deprecating smile. I'm glad to hear that because what I felt in that moment, it terrified me. Not for what I might do to him, but for what I realized about myself. My breath caught. The raw emotion in his voice sent hope and trepidation swirling inside me. And what did you realize? I asked gently, though I suspected I knew. His dark eyes seemed to glow in the low light. That I'm in love with you. Time seemed to stop. The words hung between us, their weight immense and wonderful. My lips parted, but no sound came. Only a sharp inhale of surprise and joy. Dante continued, his hand trembling slightly against my cheek now. I have been for a while, I think. Maybe since the night you threw your arms around me in that little apartment and trusted me to keep you safe. Every day since, it's only grown. I was a fool not to say it before, but I didn't let him finish. I surged up on my toes and pressed my mouth to his, effectively cutting off his next words. Dante inhaled sharply in surprise. Then with a low groan, he wrapped his arms around me, pulling me flush against him as he returned the kiss with fervor. This was no gentle, tentative kiss like the one at our civil ceremony. This was everything unspoken pouring out, his fear of losing me, my gratitude, our longing and love built up over months of restraint. I clung to his shoulders as his lips moved against, mine with both tenderness and pent-up hunger. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, I rested my forehead against his. I love you too, I whispered, my voice shaking with happiness. Saying it out loud felt like breaking the final chains that bound me. I think I've loved you for a long time, Dante. I wasn't sure if you wanted this to be real or if... He hushed me with another swift kiss, then pulled back just enough to speak. It's real. It's always been real to me, Elena. His eyes searched mine, fierce and sincere. Marrying you to protect you. It started as duty, but it became so much more. You became my light, my reason. Tonight, when you said you were my wife in front of him, I've never been more sure of what you mean to me. I love you. Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were of joy. I smiled through them. Say it again, I pleaded softly. needing to hear it once more, to banish any lingering ghosts of doubt. His lips curved and he framed my face between his hands, brushing back a stray lock of my hair. Ti amo, he murmured in Italian, the words rolling like a vow. I love you, Elena. I closed my eyes briefly, committing the moment to memory. When I opened them, I saw that his own lashes were damp. Dante's eyes shone with unshed tears. The sight made my heart squeeze. This strong man who rarely showed vulnerability was laying it bare for me. With a soft laugh that was half a sob, I kissed him again. I love you, Dante. So much. He made a sound low in his throat. And then our mouths met once more, the kiss deepening, transforming. His tongue brushed mine, gentle but seeking, and I opened to him, meeting every stroke with my own. Fire ignited in my veins, a passionate heat that had long been banked under all our caution and patience. His hands slid from my face down to my waist, then lower, gripping my hips as if to make sure I was truly there. I pressed closer, my fingers tangling in his dark hair, reveling in its softness and the warmth of his body against mine. He broke the kiss to trail his lips along my jaw, then to the sensitive spot below my ear. Elena, he whispered, my name reverent and husky. Is this okay? For answer, I tilted my head to give him better access and whispered, Yes, please. That was all the encouragement he needed. In one smooth motion, Dante scooped me up into his arms. I let out a little gasp of surprise that turned into a giggle as I looped my arms around his neck. He carried me through the living room, down the hall, toward the master bedroom, our bedroom. Tonight, it would truly become our shared space. There would be no more loneliness on opposite sides of a wall, no more unspoken barriers. The lights of the city cast a silver glow through the bedroom windows as Dante set me down beside the bed. We paused there, standing inches apart. My heart thundered with a mix of nerves and anticipation. As if sensing my flutter of anxiety, Dante brushed a thumb over my lower lip and murmured, We'll go as slow as you want. We have all night. We have forever, forever. My chest swelled. I reached up and began to unbutton his shirt, fingers trembling slightly. I want this, I assured him, meeting his gaze. I want you. His breath hitched at my touch. He helped shrug off his jacket and shirt, revealing the sculpted planes of his chest. I'd seen him shirtless before. There were mornings he'd come from a workout or when I'd tended a minor wound of his, but never in this context, under this charged atmosphere. My eyes roamed appreciatively, over his broad shoulders and the sinewy muscle beneath tan skin marked by a few small scars. He was beautiful in a raw, masculine way, and tonight, he was mine. Dante's hands moved to the zipper of my dress. With careful reverence, he slid it down, fabric peeling away until the dress fell in a whisper to the floor, leaving me in just my lace bra and panties. The hunger and awe in his eyes as he let his gaze travel over me made me flush with heat. But I didn't feel self-conscious. Not under the way he looked at me, like I was something precious and desired. You're stunning, he breathed, fingers lightly tracing my waist. I shivered under the gentle caress. We undressed the rest of the way in between slow, teasing kisses, as if savoring each newly exposed inch of skin. By the time he lifted me onto the bed, my pulse was racing and every nerve lit with want. He hovered over me, braced on his strong arms, eyes searching mine one last time. If at any point you want to stop, I silenced him by drawing him down into a deep kiss, arching my body up to press against his. A low growl emanated from his chest, and then there were no more words. Gentleness gave way to urgency as we finally allowed ourselves to express physically what we'd held back for so long. His hands mapped my body reverently, drawing gasps and shivers as he discovered what made me arch or sigh. And I explored him in turn, delighting in each ragged breath I could draw from his lips with my touch. When he finally joined our bodies, it was with a slow, careful slide and a groan of almost pained pleasure. I clutched at his shoulders, overcome by the sensation of completeness. It wasn't just bodies coming together. It was years of loneliness and fear, being driven out by love and trust in that intimate connection. Dante kissed away the tears that slipped from the corners of my eyes. Tears I hadn't realized were falling. I smiled up at him, cupping his face. Happy tears, I whispered, answering his unspoken concern. He pressed his forehead to mine and began to move in a steady rhythm that soon had coherent thought, dissolving for both of us. In that exquisite dance we lost and found ourselves. Every thrust, every caress was an unspoken I love you. Our breaths and moans mingled in the still air of the penthouse, the city lights bearing silent witness to our union. After, we lay tangled in the sheets, my head resting on Dante's chest as our racing hearts slowed together. He stroked my hair lazily, planting a soft kiss on my forehead. I felt utterly content, cradled in warmth and the aftermath of bliss. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here, madly in love, with a Mafia boss who cherished me, I would have laughed at the absurdity. Yet here I was, finally at peace. I meant what I said, Dante murmured into the quiet, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare back. Which part? I asked with a sleepy smile, tilting my face up to his fingers tracing patterns on my bare back. Which part? I asked with a sleepy smile, tilting my face up to look at him. He looked down at me, eyes full of love. Every part, but specifically that I intend to keep you safe and happy for the rest of our lives. Whatever comes, we face it together. No more secrets, no more hiding. He paused. If you want the world to know you're mine, I'll shout it from the rooftops. I laughed softly. Perhaps we can be a bit more subtle than rooftops. Then, a thought occurred to me, and I shifted so I could see him fully. Actually, there is something I want. Anything, he said immediately, sincerity ringing in that single word. I bit my lip, gathering courage to voice the idea. We never really got to celebrate our marriage. Not properly. No family, no friends, no party. I don't need anything big, but maybe we could have a reception or a ceremony of sorts. Something public, where I get to wear a white dress and you a suit, and we can dance and just declare to everyone that we chose each other. As I spoke, excitement fluttered in me. I hadn't realized how much I craved that moment, perhaps as a final closure to the quiet, secretive way we'd done things the first time. Dante's face lit up in a slow smile. You want a wedding? A renewal of vows, maybe. Since technically we're already married, I clarified, suddenly shy. It doesn't even have to be very soon. Just, at some point, he rolled us so that I was beneath him and dipped his head to steal a quick kiss. How about in a month? A month? I gasped, laughing. That's too soon to plan. I have planners on speed dial, he chuckled. Trust me, it can be done. Unless you'd rather wait longer? I wrapped my arms around his neck, gazing up at him adoringly. No, a month sounds wonderful. He grinned, boyish and triumphant. Then a month from today, Mrs. Moretti, I will give you the wedding of your dreams. True to his word, Dante spared no effort. The following weeks were a blur of secret arrangements and whispered excitement. Though we kept things under wraps from the public eye, our close friends and a few family members were quietly informed. My parents, who had been confused and worried about my sudden withdrawal during the divorce, were overjoyed and admittedly shocked to learn I'd not only found someone new, but had been secretly married to him all this time. Meeting Dante quickly put them at ease. He was charm itself, assuring them their daughter was loved and protected. Finally, the day arrived. In the late spring afternoon, atop the rooftop garden of one of Dante's luxury hotels, out of public view, yet open to the sky and cityscape, I walked down a makeshift aisle scattered with rose petals. A string quartet played a soft melody that drifted into the open air. There were perhaps 50 people gathered, Nico and a few of Dante's other loyal men in attendance, looking oddly bashful in suits. My parents and a handful of friends with delighted tears in their eyes, even Dante's old uncle Pietro, who came in from Long Island. At the end of the aisle, waiting for me, was Dante. He stood tall and proud in a tailored charcoal suit, an actual hint of moisture in his eyes as he watched me approach in my ivory silk gown. I had chosen a simple dress, elegant and flowing, and judging by Dante's mesmerized expression, it was the right choice. When I reached his side, he took my hands and whispered, "Sei bellissima, you are beautiful." I blushed like a schoolgirl. Our vows this time were brief but overflowing with emotion. We promised to love and honor each other, to face any dangers or trials side by side. When Dante said "I do," and slid a more elaborate diamond-encrusted wedding ring next to my band, my vision blurred with happy tears. My "I do" was more of a joyous sob than actual words, but he understood. The cheers that went up when we finally kissed as newlyweds were jubilant. It felt real and surreal all at once, finally celebrating our love openly beneath the golden light of the setting sun. As evening fell, the reception began under twinkling fairy lights strewn across the rooftop. There was music, laughter, clinking glasses of champagne. Dante rarely left my side, keeping me close with a hand at my waist or my hand in his, as if to silently say she's mine to anyone who looked on. And look, they did. My friends couldn't stop gushing over how handsome and attentive he was, and even the hardened men from Dante's world watched us with a sort of respectful approval. I suspected seeing their formidable boss so clearly in love made them quietly happy for him. At one point, I drifted away from the chatter, simply absorbing how far I had come and how different my life was now from a year ago. A gentle breeze played with the hem of my dress as I stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out at the glittering skyline. "Everything okay?" Dante's voice murmured near my ear, drawing me back. He had followed my gaze, but seeing nothing amiss, he looked to me in question. I smiled and turned fully into his arms, letting that chapter truly close. "Everything's perfect," I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. He smiled, though he still watched me searchingly, sensing perhaps some small resolution in me. Gently, he guided me back toward the center of the terrace. "Dance with me?" Under the canopy of stars and city lights, we swayed together to a soft Italian ballad. I rested my head against Dante's chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart. His arms encircled me, one hand warm against the bare skin of my upper back, the other clasping my hand against his chest. As the notes of the song carried us, I closed my eyes, awash in gratitude. I thought of the woman I was a year ago, lonely, afraid, belittled. And here I was now, loved, confident, cherished beyond measure. Life was strange and beautiful and unpredictable. Dante tipped my chin up gently, bringing me out of my thoughts. His dark eyes shone with devotion. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Moretti?" he asked softly. I gave a slow, contented smile. "I was just thinking how lucky I am, how far we've come." He shook his head lightly. "I'm the lucky one. You changed my life, Elena. You gave me something, someone to fight for. Beyond duty or family legacy. You gave me purpose." Emotion clogged my throat. I remembered the words he'd spoken in that cafe, the way he declared I belonged with him. How true that was. "We saved each other, I think," I whispered. His thumb caressed the back of my hand in agreement. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret." Saving me right back, stretched up to kiss him. A sweet, lingering kiss that promised many more. Around us, our guests clapped and cheered at the display. But in that moment, I only had eyes for Dante. When we broke apart, I found myself laughing softly, joy overflowing. "Never in my wildest dreams," I said, "would I have imagined this is where I'd end up." Dante smirked playfully. "Married to a Mafia boss?" "Married to the man I love," I corrected, tapping his chest lightly. "The rest is just details." He chuckled and pulled me closer, our dancing slowing to little more than a gentle sway. "I love you, Elena Moretti." "And I love you, Dante Moretti." As we held each other under the vast New York sky, I knew my story had truly come full circle, from the heartbreak of an old life ending to the breathtaking promise of a new life beginning. I had found love in the most unexpected place, found strength within myself I never knew existed. He mocked her during the divorce once upon a time, but now my story was one of triumph. Because when the powerful Mafia boss arrived to claim me as his own, he didn't just silence my past. He gave me a future I had only ever dreamed of. And as Dante's lips found mine once more in a tender, public kiss for all to see, I felt that future begin, bright and full of hope in his arms.